Hello, this is Storm Warden coming at you today with another video update. And today we're going to talk about the increasing possibility that we see a severe weather episode on our Wednesday with a pretty large area of slight risk and marginal risk. So we're going to go through all the short range models, talk about what could limit this setup and what could help this setup. And then we're going to talk towards the end of this video briefly about the tropics because there is a 40% area located in the Caribbean, which is the area that we've been talking about over the last week or so. That could bring some issues, maybe ways down the road, but we'll talk about that briefly towards the end of the video. This video will be one of my longer videos, so please stick around for some honest meteorology, obviously if you want. But if you've been liking my weather content, please subscribe. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, looking at the SPC outlook, we have a pretty large slight risk located from Texas all the way up towards Missouri, and we have a larger marginal risk. This area of slight risk is obviously going to be the most dangerous part of the system because obviously it has the highest risk of severe weather. This is a day 3 categorical outlook, so it's possible that this could go higher. This could get enhanced, but we're gonna go through that. We're gonna talk about limiting factors, and we're gonna talk about factors that could help support a more significant severe weather setup. So we're gonna start off with the GFS model, and we're gonna start off with our dew points because I love to look at our dew points. It gives me a great idea of the moisture return that we'll be looking at and things in that nature. So here's the GFS model, and we're getting into our Wednesday, and you can see the time frame up here towards the top of your screen. So we're getting into our Tuesday afternoon. So this is the Wednesday morning. You can kind of see our trough, and our cold front is going to be southeast oriented. So it's going to be moving southeast instead of cold fronts usually moving east to west. This is going to moving in from the northeast, and this will be pushing southeast. So as it's doing so, you're going to notice pretty stout moisture return as you get into our Wednesday. This should allow for a pretty big warm sector, and this should also allow for some pretty big area of severe weather concern. Potentially, as far north as Missouri, to Kansas, to Oklahoma, to Texas, to Arkansas. This is a pretty big area of moisture return. So anywhere within this moisture return, you could certainly see some severe weather, with the most prominent severe weather probably being Kansas and Oklahoma. I think those areas, particularly eastern Kansas to eastern and central Oklahoma, will probably be the areas to see the most extensive severe weather from this setup. Now, looking at our 850 millibar height winds, you're gonna want to watch out for these stronger low level winds because whenever you have these strong low level winds, it tells us that we have some pretty strong low level shear, which could help with rotating storms and creating supercells. And a lot of people, when they hear supercells, they think tornadoes, and yeah, that's what we're looking at. And this is a pretty strong low level jet, about 40 to 50 knot low level jet. This certainly could support the potential for a few tornadoes. Tornadoes isn't really the biggest threat with this setup, but I do think that it's certainly going to be a bigger threat than what we're giving it for now. With a 40 to 50 knot low level jet in the area of 1,000 to 2,000 Cape, I could certainly see some tornado warnings popping off in Kansas and Oklahoma with a pretty strong low level jet located over these areas. So, we click on the sounding in this area of the low level jet in Kansas, and that sounding looks more like it's for hail. It looks more favored for hail. But again, there's some curvature in there supporting the potential for some rotating updrafts. You can see how our low-level winds start off from the south and then they become pretty westerly as you move up in the upper parts of the atmosphere. But you can see I have a 40, 50 knot low-level jet located over Kansas and Oklahoma, which is definitely supportive of supercells and definitely some larger hail and a stronger updrafts. Now, we drop down and we look at our surface-based instability because this will only help the severe weather setup. And so we're getting to our Wednesday, and you'll notice, Cape maximizes about 1,000 to 2,000, particularly over central Oklahoma into eastern Kansas. This is the area that's probably going to be most favored for severe weather on Wednesday. We click on the sound within this area of higher instability. And notice how our soundings, they're not really large and looped. So this isn't going to be a major tornado outbreak, but large hail is certainly going to be up there as far as, one of the biggest threats with this system. Also, supercells. They're going to be supercells, certainly. And in those supercells, large hail is going to be the biggest threat. But you cannot outrule the potential for tornadoes in an environment like this with a 40 to 50 knot low level jet in an area of 1,000, 2,000 Cape with a late season setup. You can never outrule the potential for a few tornadoes in a setup like this. Now, a tool that I also like to look at is an energy helicity index. And looking at this, you can kind of see how it really sparks up towards the evening hours. Our low level jet really gets cranky as that front gets even closer, and so by this point, instability may start to wind down a little bit. But you can see how we got a lot of turning in our low levels with height in our wind barbs. So this definitely supports that rotating supercell threat. So again, supercells will certainly be a threat, but there's also be a mixed mode because there should be a line of thunderstorms that form right along this dry line like feature that will develop over Oklahoma, Kansas, and even Texas. So there will be a dry line like feature which there should be some thunderstorms that develop right on that dry line. So there should be a mixed mode of supercells in a linear bag. So again, damaging winds and hail will be the biggest threats, but isolated tornadoes certainly up there as far as possibilities as well. And here's a European model, and we'll have the level jet here. You can see that the level jet increases getting to the evening hours. So this definitely supports the potential for some supercells and some large hail and some damaging wind. So looking at the global models, there's certainly the slight risk is certainly warranted looking at the global models and seeing the setup that we're seeing. Looking at the NAM model, it actually shows a pretty extensive, large warm sector for our Wednesday, and granted, it also shows a pretty strong dryline-like feature. And right along this dryline-like feature, you're going to get some storm development, but ahead of this, you're going to get some supercells to develop as well. Now, there is some questions regarding how much storm initiation do we actually get, because there's some models that have a much stronger cap overplay, but again, I'm not too worried about that with moisture return of this magnitude. I do think that we're going to get some pretty good storm initiation. And actually, I think messy storm mode may be more the limiting factor in this scenario than us not getting storms to develop. So again, some questions there, but again, the environment looks pretty favorable for a pretty decent severe weather episode on our Wednesday. Looking at our severe weather surface-based instability forecast, and we're getting in time. And notice how instability really maximizes Wednesday afternoon right around that 21Z time frame. So this is right around that 7 o'clock time frame, and this is when things maximize. This is when our low level jet really starts to increase. This is when our instability is maximized in the afternoon. You can notice a pretty big area of, now granted it's pretty narrow, but this is a pretty nice area of 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram worth of instability from Kansas through Oklahoma. This is why I say Kansas to Oklahoma will certainly experience the worst of the severe weather. Even parts of Texas. I don't want to forget you guys down here in Texas. You guys could certainly see a severe weather episode as well. And but click on the sounding within this area of higher instability. And again, look at the analogs for supercells. So there's definitely going to be some supercells there, even a large hail. So there's definitely a lot of sounding analogs supporting that. We could certainly see, some significant hail and some supercells. That's why I say if we get some supercells to develop, even though there's certainly a possibility for tornadoes, large hail will certainly be the largest threat. Now, you see the sounding here. You notice this pretty stout cap in the lower levels of the atmosphere. When we're looking at supercells and storms developing, having a little bit of dry air over top, it helps to really get that supercell threat going. But you have a pretty stout cap at the lower levels of the atmosphere, indicating that there's some dry air up in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So whenever that happens, you don't get a lot of storm initiation. So it's quite possible that we may have some capping issues, but again, Right now this environment looks quite favorable for a severe weather episode on our Wednesday. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But again, that is a limiting factor. We could have some capping issues, and we may have some storms that may not initiate. But again, you can see our tornado threat over Oklahoma, Kansas, and it's not crazy. This isn't off the walls, but it does give us an idea that hey, there's a potential for a few tornadoes on our Wednesday. Now, you're probably wondering what does this look like on future radar? Because I just gave you all the meteorology behind this. So here's a NAM 3KM model. And the NAM 3KM model really gives us a really good idea of what our limiting factor will look like on radar. You're probably looking at this and saying, well, this doesn't look that bad. This isn't a lot of storms. And this is that cap that I was talking about, these capping issues. If you have these capping issues over these areas, it's very hard for these storms to really develop. That's why over Oklahoma, central to eastern Oklahoma, you're not really seeing a bunch of storm development. Whereas up here, where that front is really starting to sag, you're having more of that linear mode develop up here in Kansas. So there's some questions regarding how much storm development we get, but you can see how those initial cells that start developing Kansas looking pretty intense. It's probably supporting some hail and damaging winds, but you can kind of see how things grow upscale fairly quickly into a pretty decent wind bag over, Kansas and Missouri. So again, there are some questions, especially further south, regarding how much storm development do we get. But I'm betting that we get more storm development than what the NAM 3KM is giving us right now. So, you know, if you're in central to eastern Oklahoma to eastern Kansas, I definitely expect you guys to see the worst of the weather in this severe weather event. You guys are slap dab right in the middle of the SBC outlook. And you can see it right here with eastern Kansas and central Oklahoma being highlighted, but even into far western Missouri, far western Arkansas, and the northern portions of Texas could certainly see some pretty nasty severe weather from this setup too. So I don't want to forget about you guys either. Now that's an NAM 3KM model. Now I want to jump down and look at the HRR model. This doesn't go out that far, but I want to give you an idea where it's going. You can kind of see how already the HRR has pretty significant moisture return on our Wednesday morning. This is as far as it goes out, but you can see how it has pretty significant moisture return. So I don't think moisture return is going to be an issue. I don't think instability is going to be an issue. Some questions are going to still be regarding though how much storm initiation do we get on our Wednesday afternoon. So those are some questions, especially for areas of Oklahoma, because there may be some capping issues. But again, from if you're in eastern Kansas, or central and eastern Oklahoma, you guys should, see the worst of the severe weather. But again, there are still some questions in Oklahoma and further south about how much storm development do you get out of this system. Now, here's the composite reflectivity from the HWRF-V3 model. And we're going through time. And notice that storm initiation over Kansas and Missouri. So it looks like models are really honing in on Kansas being a really big play for some severe weather. But notice further south as you get into Oklahoma, there's just not as much storm initiation, maybe until we get late evening. So it may certainly be one of those days where it'll be quiet all day until it gets dark. And then that's when severe weather really starts to ramp up. You can kind of see how the HWF does that. It's that southeastward advancing front really starts to push in. You can start to see that storm initiation into eastern Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, which certainly gives us that higher threat of severe weather in those areas. So you can see those supercells that develop in eastern Oklahoma, and you can see that linear bag up into Kansas. So again, definitely some severe weather warranted props right there, based on what I'm seeing there. So that's definitely something to look out for. And this happens a lot in these areas where we have some capping issues all the way up until it gets dark. Then when it gets dark, that's when things wanna really get off and really start to get intense. So I can certainly see something in that nature where it's quiet most of the day. There's some drier and upper levels of the atmosphere, but as that front really starts to push in and it starts to moisten the upper levels of the atmosphere, it really starts to help develop these systems, to develop these robust updrafts, and therefore we get these stronger storms to develop. Now, I want to go back to the NAM 3KM because I want to show you some of these parameters that I like to look at. Surface-based instability off the NAM 3KM. So we're going to start looking at this. Now, what we have here is we have a pretty significant area of stronger instability that develops into central Oklahoma and eastern Oklahoma into Kansas. You can kind of see our southward advancing front, and it's moving pretty quickly. So this may also help to be a limiting factor because if we're not getting much of storm initiation and we're getting a fast moving front, this will help clear out this instability a lot quicker. So there's a couple limiting factors there. We have a pretty fast moving front, which kind of narrows the time frame for how much severe weather opportunities there is for Wednesday. But notice there's a pretty stout area of stronger instability, especially down here in Oklahoma, central Oklahoma especially. But also notice there's much more of a stout cap in these areas, which is why the NAM 3KM shows less in the way of storm coverage down there compared to areas further north into Kansas. So again, overall, without confusing you guys too much, the overall theme is that there's a slight risk of severe weather from Texas to Missouri. The areas the most concerned, or the biggest area that could see the most severe weather out of this system, could certainly be central Oklahoma to eastern Oklahoma into eastern Kansas to western Missouri, western Arkansas. These areas will experience the worst of the severe weather on Wednesday. And there are some questions regarding how much storm initiation will take place in Oklahoma, but I'm betting that we see a lot more storm initiation than what some of these models are giving it, with strong moisture return, pretty strong low-level jet, pretty strong heating. I expect for us to see a pretty decent severe weather opportunity on Wednesday, with damaging winds to large hail being the main threats, but tornadoes are certainly not out of the question with those supercells that form as that southward advancing front really pushes in and allows for updrafts to really become robust, especially getting to late afternoon and late evening. So that's the severe weather update. Again, that may have not been too detailed. I'm still learning about severe weather forecasting, so I did my best there. But again, as we get closer to the event, especially tomorrow, I have a much more detailed video for you guys. But again, just giving you guys an update on this pretty significant severe weather threat on your Wednesday. I wouldn't be surprised if we get an enhanced area, especially in that eastern Oklahoma to Kansas area. I definitely expect those areas to see the worst of the severe weather. So again, if you're in those areas, please be on the lookout for a pretty significant severe weather event on your way for your Wednesday. Now, tropics. We're going to shift gears. So we're going to start with looking at the ensembles. Now, I'm going to start by showing you this 40% area, which is now highlighted by the National Hurricane Center. And there's a 40% chance of cyclone formation in the next 7 days. So we may have a tropical depression or storm that forms in this area. And where it goes is very questionable. It could go north, it could go west, it could go east. Where it goes, so many questions. Which is why this is going to be a pretty brief update. I'm just going to give you a look at the ensembles. So the area that we just looked at, and I'll show you again, that's what you want to watch. So we're going through time here, and notice this highlighting of the GFS ensemble members. They really blow this thing up, and they some ensembles they go west. You can kind of just see the uncertainty with this model. Notice some models that now start getting to the Gulf, so that's definitely concerning. However, a couple of things to note. Ocean temperatures have significantly cooled off in the Gulf. Now, granted, these temperatures in the Gulf aren't so cold that you can't get a system coming in. But again, look at these ocean waters right along Florida's coast. These are really cool ocean waters. So even if we get a system that goes into the Gulf, it'll probably weaken quite significantly, especially on approach to anywhere along the Gulf Coast because there's so much cool waters. And as you continue to get these cold fronts that push south and east, this is only going to help cool the ocean even more. So again, even if we get a system into the Gulf of Mexico, there's definitely some cooler waters that will help weaken whatever does come into the Gulf, pretty significantly before it was able to hit anybody. So, you know, that's some good news for anybody who's worried. But again, if you get a pretty strong hurricane that forms the Caribbean, that would still bring some major impacts to any U.S. Mainland. There's still some questions regarding how far north this gets. Does it even go towards the U.S.? There's still some questions. But there are some ensembles, there are some models out there that are now showing a system getting into the Gulf. So that's certainly a possibility. Now here's the EPS ensemble members, and we're getting into our week. And notice EPS ensemble members, they're not getting into the Gulf of Mexico with this system. So again, there's definitely not the best trends that we've been seeing in the models. But again, we'll have to watch and see what happens over the next week or so with this system. But certainly bears watching. But now the EPS ensemble members are now getting this into the Gulf of Mexico. So this could be an issue ways on down the road. But notice that even the ones that get into the Gulf of Mexico, notice how they started weakening pretty significantly upon landfall. So this just goes to show you that ocean temperatures have definitely cooled off a lot from where they were with Helene and Milton. So again, nothing to be overly concerned about, but definitely bears watching. And looking at just the overall environment, you can kind of see how the GFS model has plentiful. I mean, that's a pretty big area of dry air coming in from our troughs that will dig in from the north over the next week or so. So there's still some limiting factors. There's plenty of dry air to the north. There's some wind shear, so there's definitely some limiting factors there. But overall, ensemble members have definitely upticking on this potential area of potential development in the Caribbean. But for now, no concern to the lower 48. But again, this definitely bears watching. It could go west, it could go north, it could go east. There's still a lot of questions, so that's why I can't really give you guys too much of a detailed update until we get more model consensus. But yeah, guys, that's all I really got. Pretty long video today. I was kind of all over the place, talking from severe weather to tropics. So yeah, but that's all I got, guys. If you're in central Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, be on the lookout for a severe weather episode on Wednesday. In Missouri as well, Arkansas, Texas. I won't forget about you guys. Watch out for a pretty significant severe weather episode in your areas. Wouldn't be surprised if we get enhanced risk, especially right here, slap dab in the middle. And then over here for the tropics, 40% area to watch out for over the next week or so, but no concern to the lower 48 as of now.